servicio de interpretación en español ubicado acá en la parte al fondo del auditorio si es que necesitan esa ayuda. Muchas gracias.
Добрый вечер, меня зовут Мария. Если вам нужен русский перевод, я буду находиться в холле, вы меня можете найти, если нужна помощь. Спасибо.
Board members, are there any items in the business agenda that you have questions on? This does not include individual action items listed on tonight's agenda. Any questions? Okay. Student and public comment. First, I'd like to review the guidelines for public comment. The board thanks the community for taking the time to attend this meeting and provide your comments to the board. We value public input as it informs our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen without distraction from electronic devices or papers. Board members and the superintendent will not respond to comments or questions during public comment. If you want to follow up from the board office, please contact Ms. Hewson or Roseanne Powell, the board manager. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration of others. Complaints about individual employees should be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have additional items or materials you'd like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you give them to Ms. Hewson to distribute to us. Requests to make public comment should be made ahead of time by contacting the board office or checking with Ms. Hewson prior to the start of the board meeting to see if there are spots available. Once the board meeting has started, we can no longer accept new requests for public comment. Okay, Ms. Hewson, do you have anyone signed up for student or public comment?
Yes, we do. We have a total of 7. And our first 2 speakers are Warda Hussein and Marie Taylor.
Okay, before you start, you'll have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first 2 minutes of your testimony, a green light will appear. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will go on. And when your time is up, the red light will go on and a buzzer will sound. We respectfully ask that you conclude your comments at that time. Okay, go ahead.
So my name is Warda Hussein, and my last name is Hussein. And I came to talk about mindful studies. So when I first came into mindful studies, my counselor suggested that I should take the class to help ease with the stress of high school when I was a sophomore. And I came in without an open mind because my family, came from Somalia, which were immigrants, and my family didn't understand or believe in mindfulness, and they didn't think that it'd be helpful or effective. At first I thought it would be an easy A, but it was more complicated than that, because with that came with just coming into class and participating. So throughout the year, mindfulness has slowly helped me deal with stress in and outside of school. And the tools that they taught me, I took it outside of class without myself knowing, and it really helped me deal with stuff like anxiety, jealousy, family problems, and also opened my mind to new coping mechanisms that help me cope with stress and depression and anxiety. And it also taught me healthy ways to deal with most of the problems in my life that I wasn't dealing in a healthy way. And mindful studies is very impactful and useful for high school students, where most teens go and deal with stress, and it's a way to unpack and help students deal with certain situations. So I don't think that we should take off mindful studies, because it's really helps students, and it's not just an easy way to get in class. It's really effective for students, because all teens throughout high school, in the sort of way they're stressed. So this is a way to help them unpack everything and just calm down, and it's a way for them to just rest through all the stress of high school. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I thought this started at 6:30. I'm sorry.
I'm Marie Taylor, and hello, members of the board. Thank you for your service on behalf of our students. I'm a teacher at Madison High School and have the good fortune of teaching yoga and mindful studies. 2 years ago, I sat in this chair to speak to you about the importance of providing adequate funding for the mindful studies programs across the district. I spoke to you with a sense of urgency about how we could best support our historically underserved populations, creating equity across the district so that schools such as mine, which serve primarily low-income Black and brown students, could support the mental health needs in a classroom setting despite not having a foundation to pay for it. Funding was restored, and since then the Mindful Studies program has expanded to include Roosevelt and Alliance at Benson, bringing the total to 9 high schools in the district which offer this program as an elective class. About a month ago, the principals learned that the district was canceling the contract with Peace in Schools altogether. This news came at a time when schools were finalizing forecasting numbers. Fortunately, James Loveland committed funds for 1 section per school with the intent to seek further funding. While a good start, principals were put in a position of having to decide whether they should trust and hope that additional funds would come through and open the appropriate number of sections based on forecasting, or play it safe and simply put 1 class in the schedule. Some schools, such as Grant, had enough kids forecast for 3 classes but aren't offering any for the upcoming school year. Overall, assuming an average class size of 25, there will be about 250 fewer Portland Public Schools students getting the opportunity to learn and practice healthy communication skills, learn how to navigate negative self-talk, examine their coping strategies and dualistic thinking. In short, learn and practice skills to support their mental health for the rest of their lives. These skills matter, and for some are truly a matter of life and death. I appreciate that Paul Anthony has come out in support of this program, and I know that when Amy Constam visited my program 2 years ago, she was moved by the experience she had there. Since my last visit, we have had a doctoral student from Johns Hopkins take a look at the effectiveness of this curriculum by surveying students and visiting the programs at Lincoln, Cleveland, and Madison. The preliminary findings suggest that the curriculum we teach and the community we build significantly supports our students. Furthermore, the researcher found that the students in our classes have higher than average ACEs scores, meaning that they have experienced more disruptions and trauma than their peers. This class also draws a relatively high percentage of LGBTQIA students, again, another group that especially needs this space and these tools. I'm concerned that it might be too late to restore the current number of sections back to the high schools for the upcoming year, but I implore you to figure out how to prioritize funding for this program. I understand that we are experiencing cuts as a district, but this is a relatively small piece of that budget, about $11,000 per section. That is a very small cost for the benefits that are afforded these students. Can we please look at comprehensive multi-year contract with Peace in Schools that prioritize serving our most vulnerable students and giving them the skills that will have long-term benefits, not only for themselves, but for everyone they interact with. As you know, it's much harder to restore programs once they've been cut than to maintain and build upon existing programs. We need to demonstrate to the students of this district that we value their well-being by committing to stable long-term funding for this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Annabelle Munana.
Chair Moore, can I make a quick request for follow-up on something? I'd like to ask Roseanne to please follow up with Ms. Taylor and with Peace in Schools to see to what extent our programming for Peace in Schools is leveraged by their external fundraising, because we've had this situation before where we have offerings with partners. We make a cut when in fact our students are receiving 4x the value of services for our investment. So when we're making those type of budget decisions, I want to know how much our dollars are leveraged by outside funds from our partners. Claire, you're looking at me quizzically. So if we could just get that information for Peace in Schools and for any other partnerships that we have where we're recommending a cut, I'd like to see how our dollars are leveraged by outside partners. Thank you.
Go ahead.
We're going to be splitting our time. First of all, just personally, Mr. Guerrero, I've got to say what a cool, powerful thing to see a Latino like yourself in a position of leadership. I'm sure you know how important it is for representation. My name is Justin Godoy. I'm a 5th grade Spanish immersion teacher at Regular Elementary. A few weeks ago, I toured Beaumont with my 5th graders so that they could see what awaited them in middle school, what opportunities they would have and who their teachers would be. They were extremely excited to see the band play and see the art projects being created. But when they asked me about electives, enrolling in art, or playing a musical instrument, I didn't know what to tell them. When their parents ask me why immersion students at Beaumont don't have the opportunity to study music or participate in art or drama, things that often critically transform a student's perception of school, the catalyst for getting them out of bed in the morning, I do not know what to tell them. My fifth graders, like all students, especially those that have been historically underserved, survive and often thrived when given access to a whole education. As you stated, Mr. Guerrero, in your column in the August 28th Oregonian, it was the violin teacher who saw and cultivated music talent within me. Our regular students won't ever have a story like this, unless something changes. You have the power to change it. The most confused, migrant students have dropped out of DLI so that they can be in band. This Sophie's Choice is simply unacceptable. The district starts programs supposedly to address cultural and linguistic inequities, only to create barriers where only white, wealthy, English-speaking families can augment cultural peace for the kids. How does this make sense? Finally, our regular community has endured, I'll keep going, I haven't seen the yellow. The most confusing aspect, actually, of this reality is the lack of true communication between the district and the affected schools. We've had to pry and cajole for information at every step of the way for the last year. I know a more earnest dialogue with the community is important for any leadership community and for any leadership committee, and this is a clear opportunity for improved engagement. Finally, our regular community has endured a disproportionate share of hardship over the years. We've lost families to gentrification, teachers and principals to the turnover, typical of lower resourced, high poverty schools, and mothers and fathers of our students to ICE agents. But we are a community that sticks together and digs in for the long haul. We believe in the potential of our students, and I hope that you believe in them too.
My name is Anabel Muñana. That's M as in Mary, U, N as in Nancy, A, N as in Nancy, A. And this is my 7th year as a 6th grade Spanish immersion teacher at Beaumont. I'm here on behalf of my current 6th grade students, and I'm here representing them today. My students and I have an RJ circle, Restorative Justice Circle, at the beginning of every week. We use these circles to build community and trust. Today our topic was about how not having an elective affects their overall mental health and self-esteem. I will be quoting 3 of my students since I'm here for them today. Student 1, I feel that this is racist for regular students to not be provided with the same elective opportunities as Alameda students. It stresses me out that I have to choose between an English language arts class and my band class. Student 2, it's not fair because band is not diverse. There is no opportunity for regular students to receive instruction in music. The whole band is white. Student 3, most students in the Spanish immersion class come from a Spanish-speaking culture. We have the right to learn in our native language, and it feels like we are being punished for doing so. And I need you to know that here today, we are at basically the last resort where we need your support and your help to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Laura Moulton and Mary Darren.
Good evening. I'm Laura Moulton. I'm it's M-O-U-L-T-O-N. I'm the parent of a freshman at Madison High School and a 6th grade immersion student at Beaumont. I'm also a member of Portland Friends of Music, and they're here today, some of them wearing pink, to support equitable access to music across the district. And in fact, there are people here tonight from many different schools, administrators, students who care about music and arts enrichment opportunities. So as Annabelle and Justin alluded to, students from Rigler arrived last fall with great expectations to discover that they were not able to access music and art electives. And parents wrote letters and made phone calls because there had to be some mistake. Surely the district wouldn't allow half of a middle school, the mostly white, affluent side coming from Alameda, access to these things, while the other half from a Title I school, predominantly kids of color, no music education, kinder through 5th grade, were excluded. But that's exactly what happened. The number of kids of color in Ms. Plank's band dropped Immersion students who had played instruments for a couple years already were forced to quit. And again, as they referred to, we're looking at exactly the same situation unless something changes. And we feel like this is damaging for a number of reasons, but here are a few. This sends the message that arts and music enrichment are for some students, but not for everyone, which is a terrible lesson for the kids who are able to participate as well as the kids who are left out. Kids without music and art are in academic classes all day, so they don't have that creative outlet. Beaumont's currently investigating why we have such statistics on numbers of kids of color, especially black kids, pulled for discipline from classrooms. And these are the same kids who don't have their hands in clay or a chance to play the saxophone. And finally, this effectively kills the band program at Madison High School, which is already spread thin. There's one teacher directing the band, teaching drumline, choir, and if the Madison feeder schools like Harrison Park and Roseway Heights don't have band programs and the number of students from Beaumont continues to decline, there won't be students entering with any kind of musical experience to form a band. That's an impossible situation to put on that teacher. Meanwhile, when I Googled and looked, Grant High School's website showed that there were something like 5 full-time performing arts positions. So if we're striving to bring this up, to any kind of equality, we're off the mark still. I was a parent rep at the committee meetings of the Task Force on Middle Grade Core Requirements. Each session, we were reminded to view our work through an equity and social justice lens. That focus, they said, was prioritizing the needs of historically underserved students. We understand that balancing core requirements alongside electives is a vexing issue district-wide, and we appreciate recent conversations about possible solutions. But in the meantime, there is still no fix, and it doesn't matter what language you use to explain to students why half of them can access music and art and the other half can't. Out of this disparity emerges a very stark picture that speaks louder than any words. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Darin, D-A-R-I-N. I am a PPS speech language pathologist as well as a PPS parent. I am speaking today in response to the decision to reduce the speech language pathology technical advisory position from 0.6 to 0.2 FTE. This position is vital to the cohesive functioning of over 90 SLPs and should not face a reduction. SLPs do not have a TOSA position, any SLPs in any administrative positions, and are often isolated in buildings. From my knowledge, no other group of educators in this district has a similar support system or lack of, and our TA position is vital to our cohesive functioning. The TA position used to be full-time until about a decade ago, when it was cut to 0.6. At that time, we also had a licensed speech language pathologist in administration, which is no longer the case. Our supports have already been eroded and further cuts are unbearable. I wanted to detail a few of the many ways that I have personally been affected by having TA support in the past few years. Number one, countless questions answered. I did a quick check of how many questions I had emailed our TA my first year at PPS. In 1 month, there were 17 questions I asked that she answered quickly. These were questions, seriously important questions about evaluation, special education procedures, as well as law and service delivery. Some of these were time sensitive, and I fear that a TA who works 1 day a week will not be available for quick responses. Number two, work with calibration of assessment and services. This role is essential as SLPs are often isolated in buildings. As we look at practices district-wide, we need to ensure equity of eligibility standards and services. I personally have adjusted my practice to reflect district trends that would not have been apparent to me without TA support. Professional development that reflects needs. It takes a good amount of time to assess what collective skills are needed and to organize training that reflects actual need in the district. And the last thing, communication with administration. We know that our special education administrators are extremely busy. I worry that without our group's concerns being funneled through a single voice, that we're gonna overwhelm the administrators. I also wanna be clear, we are not asking for extra FTE, but to be allowed to set aside 0.6 for our TA position that will come from our general SLP pool, as we have done historically. The cost of the district is minimal, but the benefit for collaboration and consistency of speech-language pathology practice is huge. Consistency in service delivery and assessment, professional development that reflects actual need, and cohesion of speech-language pathologists have direct effects on some of our most vulnerable students. Thank you.
Lastly, we have Cynthia Velasquez and Ellie Baumgartner.
Good evening, distinguished board members and Superintendent Guerrero. My name is Cynthia Velasquez, and I work as a special education, ESL TOSA, and bilingual school psychologist. School psychologists provide an invaluable service to Portland Public Schools in regards to providing supports to our students, families, and school staff. Our base and purpose is in best practice and equity, and understanding the impact of our decisions. We abide by the standards of the National Association of School Psychologists, but we cannot exist within best practice if we exist within the margins and the bare minimum of the law. In PPS, we have 55.6 school psychologists, and to maintain best practice, we strongly and without doubt rely on the school psychologist technical assistant. Kristen Irwin, our school psychologist technical assistant, has provided the following: creation of the student intervention team form on the PPS dashboard, which our school teams access to collect academic and behavioral evidence, as well as examining factors of underrepresented, culturally and linguistically diverse students. Creation of the multi-tiered systems of support training that has provided training to over 35 schools in Portland Public. Collaborative creation of the cultural linguistic versus disability matrix, which assists us in gathering and determining if culturally and linguistically diverse students meet key factors for special education. I've provided that form in front of you, that matrix. Numerous hours in the development of monthly and specialized trainings for the school psychologists, including equity-focused trainings and discussions of the impact of our work. Actively recruiting prospective school psychologists, participation on the interview committee, supporting newly hired psychologists, training them continuously throughout their initial experience in Portland Public, supporting evidence-based practices, application of research, and providing training on new and updated standardized assessments. Collaboration and shared professional trainings with the speech pathologists and school counselors, collaborations with the MTSS department, ESL, curriculum, student success, and health department, case-by-case consultation in regards to individual students, and school team guidance. I could continue on, but sadly, this position is being cut from point 6 to point 2. Where will that leave 55.6 school psychologists? But a greater question, where will that leave our students, our families, our school staff? What are the repercussions of this decision? The repercussions are dire, and they are great. We will truly exist within the margins of the law and within the margins of equity. We will no longer have the wealth and depth of knowledge. We will no longer have cutting-edge information, research, and training provided to us. So I urge the school board to consider the implications of this decision. I'd urge the school board to think of our students because they are ultimately the ones who we serve. We must do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ellie Baumgartner, Baumgartner. It's so nice to see so many of your faces again outside of the weekend work of the PPS visioning process. It was exciting to get to dream big together, to collaborate, and to create future profiles of students and adults that we want to see in PPS and in our communities. Part of that work was reimagining what PPS could look like, and it fits perfectly with why I'm here today. It is my great pleasure to be here to advocate wholeheartedly for two positions that fully embody that work: the technical advisors for speech-language pathologists and school psychologists. I ask each of you to remember that most of our students who receive special education begin their time in PPS in general education. Like it has been mentioned, the TA's expertise is critical in collaborating across departments, especially with our new and emerging MTSS departments in our practices of accurately identifying students in special education. The most common special education eligibility categories are communication disorder and specific learning disability, each of which are evaluated by SLPs and school psychologists respectively. However, we support many students across all special education categories, including mental health, attention deficit, Down syndrome, etc. In order to best serve these students, we have to have TAs. We do not have administrators who have the level of expertise embodied in Kristen Irwin and in Megan Brown. The TAs, the most important things that they do is coordinates evidence-based professional development, create and sustain newer, efficient systems to make equitable, data-driven decisions in our schools, serve as liaisons in our communities and with university experts to help shape both of these science-driven fields and to help us cohesively navigate complex changes at the state and federal level. The SLP TA supports over 95 speech-language pathologists across the districts, from focused classrooms to learning centers in K through 21 classrooms. We serve 4,300 students across every eligibility category. The TAs are people who guide practices as we teach students how to use assistive technology, work with students who stutter, who have hearing impairment, who have learning and language impairment, autism, dyslexia, and other disabilities. We conduct thorough, rigorous evaluations with the help of community agents and parent input. We do this across languages, races, socioeconomic statuses, and the TA is critical in aligning and calibrating that work with a racial and social justice focus. In order to fully implement these best practices, we will need more time with fully funded TAs to see outcomes of this investment. I am hopeful that with fully funded TA roles for SLPs and school psychologists, that in special education, our students' best days are yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all again for your comments. Please feel free to connect with the board manager, Roseanne Powell, if you have something specifically you want to follow up with the board or board office. Okay. We'll give just a minute while everybody files out. Okay, can we move on to the student representatives report? Do you have anything?
For the population that's left. No. What paper do I need? Hold on.
Go for it.
Okay, I'm gonna go. Just real quick. So I want to put out to the public that I'm really excited tonight. The DSC has been working really hard in the past couple of months to get our student representative and DSC policy first read. It is now there, so we're super excited to introduce that later in tonight's meeting. I really want to thank all of the kids that have been, or the students that have been helping me work on this, and it's been really fun, and I'm glad they were able to work through this process as well. I think everyone's learned a lot about how policy works. It's been a great time to do that. And then I just want to give a quick shout out to all of the juniors and seniors at all of our Portland high schools, because in about a couple weeks they're going to get started on AP testing and IB testing, and I know it can get stressful and a little worrying, so I just wanted to wish good luck to all of them as well. So, good things coming.
Thank you.
Yes, take mindfulness.
Yeah.
Mindfulness, right. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a proclamation celebrating National Arab American Heritage Month, and I'm going to ask Director Bailey to read the proclamation aloud.
Thank you. I guess it's just going to be noisy out there, so go for it. So this is April. It's National Arab American Heritage Month. Whereas for over a century, Arab Americans have been making valuable contributions to virtually every aspect of American society in science, medicine, law, business, education, technology, government, military service, culture. And whereas Victor George Atiyeh, who served as the 32nd governor of Oregon from 1979 to 1987, was the first Arab American elected as governor of a state. And whereas, since migrating to America, people of Arab descent have shared their rich culture and traditions with neighbors and friends, while also setting examples of model citizens and public servants. And whereas Arab Americans have also enriched our society by sharing in the entrepreneurial American spirit that makes our nation free and prosperous. And whereas the history of Arab Americans in the United States remains neglected and individuals are harmed by misconceptions, bigotry, and anti-Arab hate in the forms of crimes and speech. And whereas Arab American issues such as civil rights abuses, harmful stereotyping, and bullying must be combated in the forms of education and awareness and advocacy, I'll add. And whereas Arab Americans join all Americans in the desire to see a peaceful and diverse society where every individual is treated equally and feels safe. And whereas the contributions and heritage of Arab Americans have helped us build a better state and nation, now therefore we announce that Portland Public Schools celebrates the contributions of that Arab Americans have made to society, and hereby declare April 2019 to be National Arab Heritage Month in Portland Public Schools. And we encourage Portlanders to join us in this special observation. Thanks.
Hear, hear.
Okay, the board will now proclaim April as National Arab American Heritage Month. Do I have a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
Director Brim Edwards moves, Director Bailey seconds.
Sure.
They both did.
Yeah. that's-
Okay. We'll now vote on the proclamation. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Okay, the proclamation is approved by a vote of 6-0. And Student Representative Nick Paisler?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
I'd like to ask, from just the comm standpoint, that anything that is happening this month in celebration that be shared with the board or the broader community, as we have with the other months recognizing different groups. Thanks.
Okay. Superintendent's report. Superintendent, give your report.
I would, in fact. Thank you, Chair Moore. Good evening, directors, students, families, community here and viewing at home. We're heading into the home stretch for this school year. We still have a full and weighty agenda to accomplish. Our upcoming meetings are going to be an opportunity to learn about the state of the arts education across Portland Public Schools, and I'll also be presenting my recommended budget to the Board of Education, just as a little bit of a sneak preview there. We're going to be describing our next level of proposed work, given our constrained resources, which will include a description of work in a few key areas. Our continued core curriculum development work, our enhanced special education services, and our differentiated supports to schools. So we're looking forward and are preparing that information for our board, which we'll be sharing soon. Tonight, however, I want to pay tribute to our students. As we close in on the school year, there are a great number of accomplishments and celebrations, and really would like to remind ourselves of why we do what we do, why we love what we do, and want to dedicate this evening's report to recognizing the achievements of our brilliant, talented, and artistic students. Some of these celebrations focus on individual efforts, some of them on teams, and some of them on collective work that we do as educators, leaders, and advocates for our students. I'll start by saying this is by no means an exhaustive list. It's just a snapshot of some things we want to celebrate. It goes without saying, this is Portland Public Schools. There are on average over 300 different arts-related showcases going on across our school. We hope our directors have had a chance to attend some of the events happening this month, or all the single occasions when our students are showcasing their talents. Last week, Portland had the opportunity to host the a national level educational technology conference. I had a chance to open, and our Lincoln High School Jazz Band was able to perform for over 1,000 attendees. So it's instances like this where it's nice to remind ourselves that we really have some talented students out there. Starting with yesterday, actually, Monday, PPS hosted the statewide MECHA conference. It was actually hosted by West Sylvan Middle School. For those of you who may not know, MECHA stands for Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. It's the biggest gathering for Latinx students in the state of Oregon. This is the second time historically that the conference has been hosted by Portland Public Schools, in the second year in a row. I don't know what the coincidences there are to serve as the host district. But it was an uplifting afternoon for me, and I know a busy and productive day for more than 600 students who attended. That's 600 students coming in on a day that otherwise might have been a day not in school. They attended workshops. There was a college fair that took place. I want to thank PCC, Linfield, and among the other colleges who participated. We heard life stories from Multnomah County Circuit Judge Xiomara Torres, as well as our Chief of Engagement, Jonathan Garcia. What they heard were similar tales of undocumented children of immigrants rising above expectations and taking on the challenges that prove that barriers can be overcome and that struggle can lead to strength. Those were some of the themes in my own afternoon keynote to them, which apparently Lincoln is tweeting as quite a poetic event. So Saturday, many of our directors were present at the All Born In conference. This is also an annual gathering of parents, students, educators, advocates, and others who want to see change and progress, and how we include students of all abilities in our schools and programs. More than 500 people were in attendance, which demonstrates a continued high level of interest and commitment in this subject. This year, PPS was the top sponsor of the program, and with good reason. Special education is a critical part of our work we do as a district, and in partnership with our families and local partners, we need to stay at the forefront of best practices and inclusionary thinking. I was happy to be invited to provide the welcoming address. And looks like the attendees, the message resonated for many of them given the feedback. But just to give a little bit of a sneak preview of the kinds of system shifts that we're looking for, many of them that are emerging as part of our visioning process, is this notion of acceptance and awareness of difference and disability, and the understanding that special education is a service, not a place. Moving from inclusion as being a special education responsibility to inclusion as also being a general education responsibility. And just moving from low expectations to high expectations for every one of our students, and a greater understanding among all educators regarding disability. We still have a ways to go. This will be a journey. But after spending time at the conference and interacting with parents and other stakeholders, I can see that there's no shortage of determination to make those system shifts. On my way home, stopped by Concordia University and to observe the You Be the Chemist competition. This happens state by state across the country. There'll be a nationwide sort of final competition. But we had a number of PPS students, all from Access Academy, just to be clear. What I observed was a chance of students had to answer in rapid fire fashion questions on topics like nuclear fusion, molecular chemical formations, and other questions I just simply couldn't comprehend as a music history major. I left incredibly impressed that our Access Academy students placed so well. So I want to give a special note of honor to 4 of our Access Academy students who made the semifinals, and 2 were in the final competition. Special shout out to science teacher Alfonso Garcia Riola for inspiring his students to learn and compete at the highest levels. These are Jason Lee's students running their morning mile, which happens every Friday. This is a weekly run, and one of the reasons why Jason Lee is one of the only 3 schools in the state to receive an 1819 Oregon School Wellness Award from the Oregon Department of Education. The honor rewards outstanding efforts to improve child health and make the connection between nutrition, physical activity, and academic achievement. Last week, representatives from ODE and the Oregon Dairy and Nutrition Council presented Principal Cardona and his staff with a $2,500 prize. Principal Cardona has incorporated physical movement into various parts of the school day. One benefit is that the school has reduced its number of student exclusions. The school's also starting programs to allow staff and parents to engage in physical activity, including yoga classes for son parents. So congratulations to Principal Isaac Cardona, staff, and our very healthy students. More honors for our outstanding students. This is the James John team taking home first place honors for elementary students at the annual statewide Battle of the Books contest. Students read from a list of assigned books and answer questions about what they have read, competing with other schools from around the state. Congratulations to the James John Elementary for your award. Not to be outdone, the West Sylvan team also won first place in the middle school division. So congratulations to both of our schools and to our very devoted student readers. For an incredible 6th straight year, Grant Magazine won a National Gold Crown Award for scholastic publications. That means it ranks among the top student publications in the United States, a little like the Pulitzer Prize for student journalism. So the awards are presented by the Columbia Scholastic Press Association, and the magazine staff, led by editor-in-chief Noreen Dubé, got to travel to New York to accept the prize. And on a related note, Lincoln Senior and, pardon my pronunciation, Sagarika Ramachandran has been selected as the winner of the Oregon Student Journalist of the Year Award. She serves as editor-in-chief of Lincoln's newspaper, the Cardinal Times. So congrats to our student journalism leaders. We know that we had an outstanding year in girls and boys basketball. The names of Oregon's all-state basketball teams have been released, and PIL teams are very well represented. Starting with the girls, no surprise on first team, Sierra Ellington, who helped the Benson Texters win the state championship. We also had for second team Taylor Lyde, another Texter, and a number of honorable mentions. Also from among the boys who made the all-state team, first team Marcus Sahoni from Jefferson and Aaron Deloney from Grant, second team Ty Rankin from Grant also, as well as some honorable mentions as well. You may have heard this story. Benson Tech sprinter Micah Williams is off to a very sizzling start as we enter the spring track and field season. He won gold at the New Balance Nationals Indoor Championship in New York in March, blistering the 200 meters in 6.6 seconds. This is the 3rd fastest time ever by a high school athlete. Incredible. To our scholar athletes, to our book lovers, to our young scientists, our young journalists, to our students who overcome barriers every day to grow, achieve, and thrive, I want to offer my thanks, congratulations on your accomplishments. Want to end almost on one final note. You'll see some pictures up on the screen here. It's National Assistant and Vice Principal Week, everyone. And as a former principal, I know the challenges and hard work it takes to be in a school leadership role, and can definitely appreciate the important role that our APs play in the daily life of a school. So a big thank you and appreciation goes out to all of our outstanding assistant principals and vice principals here at PPS. And I think, am I wrapping up there? Do we have a video clip? we have a video clip. So I think we're going to show a very short video, just as a little precursor to a State of the Arts presentation coming up to the board, inviting you to a full stage production at Jefferson, and remind everyone again to check our school websites for an assortment of plays, musicals, and other performances going on all around the district. This is a particularly unique opportunity at Jefferson, who I don't think has put on a drama production in recent
25
years.
minutes. I'm
So
afraid
here
we
we
can't
go.
take any more chances. My deepest apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Ushers, lock the doors. I'm Samuel Perrin. I play Wadsworth the butler, and I just hit the mic. I'd like you to come see our show, Clue. It's the 12th and the 13th of April. And I love attention. I'm kind of a... I love attention.
I think it gives us a sense of community.
Someone joking! Someone joking!
I think that there should be a theater department at every school because I mean there's a lot of kids that have an interest in it and it's really fun.
Like I just go on stage and I do my thing.
And I hope, for me, it's all about that collaboration piece. I hope they realize that the struggles and the joys of working with others and sharing interests helps create something really beautiful.
Starts at 7. It's a really great show. We have a really great cast, and it's a fun show about a comedy murder mystery, and I'd really love you to come see it.
We invite everyone to check out Clue, a theater production at Jefferson High School on April 12th and 13th. And I apologize to our viewing public for our technical difficulties. We're going to remedy all those issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You weren't on the track team, were you? You were like football and wrestling.
That is true. I only did one season of cross country. It just was too much.
Yeah, because that time for how many yards and how many seconds?
6 seconds for the 200.
Are you asking for a fact check?
It's probably 60 meters is the indoor dash.
It was fast.
All
We'll
right.
just say it was fast, but
Way
not
fast.
quite that fast.
Clearly, I wasn't paying attention to the math. I think we're featuring the student athlete on our homepage, so we invite everybody to check it out.
60-meter dash.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take it up with staff in the morning. Thank you.
Your penance is you're going to have to race him.
And we will time you. Okay. Next item is inter-district transfers. And Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this item?
I'll certainly be happy to bring up staff, Judy Brennan from our enrollment office, who will provide some context and describe for you what's on deck here.
Here every year around the same time to speak with you about something that affects several hundred students. They're coming in and out of Portland Public Schools every year. Many of those families are really anxious to get the process rolling. State law requires that it's school districts that make determination every year of whether to accept or release any, some, or no students through the standard inter-district transfer process. We've provided in your packet some recommendations. These are largely in line with the recommendations that we made for you last year and in recent years. Working together as a staff team representing multiple departments, we believe that they're consistent with your overall philosophy around transfers that are reflected in PPS policy. So the package that we have in front of you, we hope that through resolution at maybe your very next board meeting, you'll be able to approve and give us permission to prioritize the students who have lived in one district, have made a recent move, and would like to stay in their current district. So that's our first priority, students who have been affected by some mobility. And you know, in some cases that's by choice, and in some cases for families it's not. But those are the students that we'd like to accept all of if they're going to be remaining in their current PPS school. Last year we had, I believe, 143 students went through the process and stayed with us through that category last year. And we'd also agree that it makes sense to release any students in that similar category. So if you lived in another district, are now a PPS resident, and would like to remain in your current district, we would release you based on those grounds. No limit to the number of those students. Last year, I think we had 23 students who left PPS. Remember that we are the biggest district in the region. We share a border with about 7 other districts. Most of our population changes happen along our eastern border. So we generally will have more students who are moving out of our district and wanting to remain than we have students moving into our district from elsewhere. So it's a higher flow in than out. Along those lines, we also ask you to allow us to accept all incoming siblings of students who have already been approved to be in PPS. So if the older child was approved, say 2 years ago, and the family wants both kids to be in PPS, if there's space at their requested school, we'd like to accept them. And similarly, if we've already released a student to another district and a new sibling of that student would like to be released, we ask that you give us permission to do so. An additional category that wasn't in place last year, but we are asking for your consideration of, is to allow students who've attended a public charter school for at least 3 consecutive years and are completing the highest grade of that year to be allowed to be released to remain in that district. This is in place in part so that we can provide consideration for students who have been at Trillium Charter School who live in other districts who may want to remain in a PPS school afterwards. This would give them higher priority than other students seeking to remain in PPS. It wouldn't be a guarantee. There'd have to be a space at their requested school, and they would still have to receive permission from their resident district. But it's one additional step that we could take because that is something that those families didn't anticipate happening, and they've already made a home in PPS. If they'd like to continue, this would help. And it's a small number of families. Been working closely with some of these families. They're really hoping for that opportunity, and that's one step that you could take that would help us get there. Finally, we'd like to just have some space for students who would like to come to PPS, who aren't in PPS yet, if we have room in our current schools. When we say room in our current schools, you know for a fact that many of our schools are full, and based on our staffing thresholds, there isn't a lot of room. But if we've already staffed a school and the principal believes that there are maybe 2 or 3 spaces in that 4th grade and we have applicants who would like to come, we'd like to be able to accept up to 100 of those students. We would cap it because our intent here is not to grow our district while other districts might be losing students, but it is simply to recognize that we may have some space, and where there's interest, we would support that. So that's essentially the package that we have before you. It's written with more details. There's some charts if you're interested in the flow of students in and out. And I'd be happy to answer some of your questions, make some clarifications so that we can move towards a final package.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And we appreciate the very complete memo. I've got an eclectic set of questions, though. The first one is probably, you're probably the wrong person to ask, but I do notice on your graph you've got down Marcola Virtual Charter School. Mm-hmm. Are we tracking how the kids are doing in that?
My office does not track how students do in virtual charter schools. There may be the potential for that. We could certainly maybe check in with our pretty limited system planning and performance team. Might be the best way to do that. I know that there's Forecast 5 data, so I mean, I can make some inquiries.
Oh,
Oh, okay. That would be terrific if you could. Thank you.
Not just how many students are there, but how they are doing.
Yes.
I'm not sure if there is a way to disaggregate student outcomes by district school, not enrolled school. But I will try and find out.
Thank you very much. I've heard concerns from some other real, physical, existing districts around us about how their students are doing in virtual charters. The other question I wanted to ask, I understand that the Russian immersion program at Kelly is now being cut back to just 1 year or one string of kindergarten. And can we address that if we vote for your recommendation at the next meeting? Can we get that corrected? Will that throw open more opportunities for more students?
And maybe before you answer, I'll pile on with I had a question about Kelly as well. So are there any exemptions for that program? Because the majority of those students are from out of district, so they still fall within the parameters of these constraints here? Or is there an exception since it's a collaborative, multi-district program?
Well, it's not technically set up in any way that would allow for any exemption. Every student who enrolls in Kelly has to follow the standard process, particularly this year, because the open enrollment provision that did exist in state law sunset last year.
Right.
Through open enrollment, we were able to maintain a higher number of non-resident students as newcomers in the program because we were not required to receive a release from the other districts. So remember, because there's two steps in the process, even, and to maybe answer your question, Director Anthony, even if PPS accepted all the students who were interested in the program, they still have to be released from their resident district. Our experience over the past couple of years when open enrollment hasn't been in place is that we didn't wind up receiving enough students to generate full classrooms. So then we'd have small cohorts that only became smaller over time. So that, I think it's been 3 years now that we've been in this almost teeter-totter-like state of trying to determine whether it's better to start small and maintain a full cohort, or to start with smaller class sizes in two, like say 16, 17 students in 2 classrooms, knowing that eventually you're going to have to compress down to 1. The figures regarding Russian immersion for next year are based on the interest of resident students that have been received through our lottery process to date. So we start with our resident base.
Mm-hmm.
There is room to add on additional non-resident students. It would take a significant number of non-resident students, and I would say in my opinion, it's unlikely that we would achieve enough to get to 2 full classrooms. However, it's definitely not up to us in the transfer office to determine how many sections you want to have. There's a whole other process through staffing and otherwise that you can work on.
My concern is, well, several concerns, but if we only have 1 kindergarten class, by the time that class matriculates to Lane and then to Franklin, it will have evaporated.
It's becoming increasingly unsustainable.
Yeah. Would you perhaps be able to poke your colleagues with a sharp stick? Superintendent Guerrero.
I think you read my mind on this question. I think thank you to Director Brennan. I think she probably elaborated a lot of what we would say regarding sustainability in the enrollment. Maybe Dr. Valentino can add a little flavor on the programmatic, but I think the ultimate question is, what does this mean when there seems to be a demand, but they're in residence in a neighboring district?
Correct, and Director Brennan actually gave me some clarity. So thank you, what you informed the board with. The truth of the matter is the numbers, And so the options then are extending time for potential student candidates who are internal, to provide opportunities for more families to take advantage of that opportunity. Going outside of the school district, there are other school districts across the country who actually work cross-district. There is the opportunity to share space and teachers and students, but that would mean a collaboration across bordering districts. That is also an option. The other is to recruit outside of Portland Public Schools to those districts that might not be aware that that opportunity is still available to them. So there are options, they're just not options that the district has had to avail itself of, or that's made the decision that it wants to maintain a two-strand program at Kelly Elementary.
Well, I know that the Russian community advocates very strongly, advertises very strongly, and it certainly crosses the borders. As Ms. Brennan, as I understood your response, the issue is not a lack of parent and student interest, it is getting their home districts to release them.
That has definitely been a
yeah.
challenge for some families in the past. If I could just add, the way that state law works around inter-district transfers at this time is that districts can't take into consideration when they're releasing students the type of school that they want to go to. Factors such as native language and the like simply aren't allowable. I've been here speaking with you about this when we were talking about the return to Albina options as well. So as long as you have like a really blind state laws around these types of transfers, we're stuck in a lot of ways. Now, some districts are very flexible, others are less flexible. The students interested in Russian immersion come from a range of districts who make decisions at very different times. For example, David Douglas typically doesn't make decisions about the students that they release until the first week in August. That leaves us very little to, so if we're counting on students from that district and some of them don't win, we have very little time to adjust. Those are all factors that, that's just some of the environment in which these decisions are made.
If I can chime in here. I think we have organized ourselves in a way that we have maybe created constraints on sustaining or growing specialized programs, and I think I would suggest that if we're planning to do a focus option review across the board for the district, I think it might behoove us to consider reconsider our model of DLI programs. And because I can imagine that there might be considerable interest across some districts for families to participate in some of the really specialized DLI programs that we have. You know, we've got Russian, we've got Vietnamese, both of which are having difficulty attracting enough students within PPS. But when those programs were created way back when, they were located in areas that had, I mean, there was an enormous Russian community in Portland for a very long time. They have since migrated mostly to Clackamas, which does not have a Russian language program. So, I mean, if we could explore some kind of collaborative arrangement that would allow us to circumvent, to use another way to get students into those programs, I think that would be helpful.
Chair Moore, I think you're bringing up some important variables here. It's hard to have these are not decisions we can make in isolation because they are across district borders. This would be a great MESD Multnomah getting my colleague superintendents around the table to have this exact discussion, plus Clackamas in this case, because we only have the indication of demand through the requests that are made, and we have no reason to believe that there's a critical mass. It seems to be diminishing. So if there's some other way that we could legitimately sort of plan on, then we'd like to know that. But it's a conversation we need to have with our neighboring superintendents who are seeing their own shifts in enrollment in pockets. So I think we'll as a next step sort of reach out and see if we can get a table on this topic.
And I agree, Rita. I think it's good to include not the other languages as well.
And just to clarify one point, as I recall, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, we can't advertise targeting other districts. Isn't that correct?
It was very explicit with open enrollment. It isn't in statute with the standard process. It was explicit with open enrollment, which has sunset.
Let's get those billboards going. No.
Well, and again, I think that it's really difficult when you've got families who are jumping through every hoop we can, and they get all the way down the road, and then the answer is no, for reasons that because they're one of many, many, many families seeking transfer out, and they can't consider these things. So I wouldn't say don't advertise, but just remember that if we're setting up hope that we can't
with their
address.
fellow districts are really important, and that would fly in the face of that. The other thing with the Russian immersion program, was there an issue of families sticking with the K-5 and then going back to their home district after that as well?
I believe we've seen some pretty significant attrition, particularly between grade 5 and 6, from non-resident families.
Yeah, which adds to the difficulty of sustaining a program in the upper grades.
I have a separate question in the staff recommendation. So back to the piece about the charter schools, which I do really appreciate adding that, particularly at this moment for Trillium. But students who attended a public charter school for at least 3 consecutive years and are completing the highest grade this year, can you describe the rationale for that caveat?
We pulled this right out of state statute. There's a set of priorities that you could consider, and this is boilerplate from there. So we thought it would be fair enough and certainly pass any scrutiny if people had any challenges that took it to the state level.
But we wouldn't have to include that, or completing the highest grade level.
We wouldn't have to. I think if I understand the intent and with which the legislature added this 2 years ago, it was, they wanted some evidence of stability and that it would be, you've gone as far as you can, but you want to stay in a district. Of course, with Trillium, every grade is the highest grade this year.
Right.
So that would apply to all.
Termination, right.
But this would be, could also apply to a student who lives in Park Rose districts, has been at Arthur Academy through K-5, and might be interested in a transfer to remain at PPS for grade 6. As opposed to just any student who happened to be at Arthur Academy from another, or who had been in a charter school just for 3 years, regardless of the year that they were in.
Any other questions? I have a kind of, this is very much an O, by the way. 2014-15, we had a net influx of 485 students, with 634 students coming in. In 2018-19, we have a net of 145. So between those 2 years, there's been a steady decline.
Our world changed. Like, that's when the policy change happened, that the state law change happened. And if you see the footnote, way down on the bottom on that footnote, from 2014 and every year prior, every student's agreement had to be renewed every year. Starting in 2015-16, you could be approved through whatever duration a district decided. What we have before you today is you're approved through the highest grade of your current school. So that means a student who was approved to a K-8 is here in PPS for 9 years as long as they want to stay, instead of having to be renewed every year.
Oh, I get it. So this
Yeah.
is just an artifact of the approvals. Oh, got it.
Absolutely not a count of non-resident students. It might actually be helpful to see that on the bottom, but it
got
also
it.
may not. There's more than 1,100 non-residents across PPS, including in our charter schools. Some of those students don't have to go through the standard interdistrict process. Most of them do. That's the cumulative effect. So we share with you the one dose, and then when you look across the district, it's the cumulative.
So we'll be voting on this at our next meeting?
Yes. Okay? Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
One other question. And it applies to Ms. Brennan's comment about we know we have overcrowded schools. Aren't we supposed to get an annual report on enrollment hotspots? Have we?
We did not this fall.
Yeah. It would be good to get that, to get the data, because we all know, but we don't know.
Okay. Next item is first readings and information about 3 policies. And I'd like to ask Director Brim Edwards, who chairs the board's Policy and Governance Committee, to introduce the first readings of the following policies: capital asset renewal funds and plans, community use of school buildings and facilities, and student representative duties.
Great, thank you. So, how do you know you guys are going first? Actually, I'm not even sure we are going to need you. This is a pretty simple adjustment. So the very first policy that we have under consideration for a first reading came out of the committee with a unanimous recommendation to make some minor adjustments to an existing policy. And it's the capital asset renewal funds and plans, policy 8.70.004. And I'm going to provide the short, if you look at the red line version of the policy, a very short, very minor set of changes, but I think actually it's a set of changes that will give district staff greater flexibility in how we utilize our capital funds, and I think also give us the flexibility to address those capital improvements that need to be prioritized. So essentially, the policy allows for the construction excise tax and the capital asset renewal funds to address capital improvements issues in any improvement that meets the definition of capital improvement as a capital improvement. So essentially, how this originally was set up, it was fairly restrictive, and we are changing the definition to make it less restrictive, provide more flexibility, and this was a policy change that was requested through the Deputy Superintendent for Business and Operations and from the Facilities and Asset Management Department. And again, this came out of committee on a 4-0 recommendation, and we're recommending it be first read and put out for a 21-day public comment. Any questions by board members? Okay. Do you want me to roll into the next one? Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna, so that'll be out for a 21.
Sorry, guys.
We'll be right here.
I
The
don't
bottom
think
line
it's
is
not
that-
necessary to come up unless we have, let's just see if we're on a roll. So again, that'll be out for a 21-day public comment, but it came recommended to us from staff. The second first reading that came from the committee, again, a unanimous recommendation out of the committee is is an amendment to the community use of school buildings and facilities, policy 3.30.010. And this one actually came as a suggestion from a community group from Scott School. And they noted that our current policy states that the public shall be expected to reimburse the district for use of our facilities to ensure that funds intended for education are not used for other purposes, and the district receives fair value for the use of the buildings and facilities, which is a prudent position for the district to take. Our facilities are primarily for our students and our educational mission. And so when others use our buildings for school uses, that there is a range of fees that are charged. But the issue that the Scott School community raised, which is not just unique to the Scott School, is that if there are sort of school affiliated groups, PTAs, PTOs, booster clubs who are using the facilities, that they may have the civic use of buildings fee waived, but under some circumstances they may still be charged custodial fees, which again is another, I think, prudent management and operational approach for groups that aren't school groups, but as they noted, things that other schools, if they have the resources, can easily pay out of PTA funds or PTO funds or foundation funds for the custodial use, that not all schools have those same resources, and that it really limits, in some cases, their ability to have host school-wide events in their own school building. So this amendment, I'm just going to read it so people were clear that the only change in the policy is through administrative directive, the superintendent shall create a custodial fee waiver process for organizations directly affiliated with a PPS Title I school, schools with a majority of historically underserved students, and schools identified for improvement as designated by the district. That shall allow the district to grant a limited number of custodial waivers for community events as more fully defined in the administrative directive. So essentially this creates, in our policy, a mechanism that those custodial waivers can occur. If we look at the impacted schools, what this change proposes, it would be about 32 schools. And the allocation that we budgeted for this, because we want to make sure that we also don't create an unlimited sort of benefit, that it's 6 hours. What's being proposed is about 6 hours of custodial service, which is about, so it'd be one opportunity. And I think this is, as it heads out to public comment, I think we'll get some useful feedback of whether that's sort of we have the right mix of schools that would be covered. I think we've done a good job identifying those school communities that potentially could need those waivers. And the question, I think there may be a lot of detailed questions that ultimately will be answered through the administrative directive of how they decide on, which school event. But I do think this may be a case where there's some things that we haven't thought about or anticipated. We may get feedback in the public comment period that we might want to do some fine tuning. But the intent is to provide a level of equity that school communities don't have the entire sum of their fundraising event or community event, those resources going to pay for a custodial service.
Is the parentheses, e.g. PTA, PTO, booster clubs, part of the amendment?
It is, and I didn't read it because I think it's at the wrong point in the sentence.
That's exactly. It needs to go after organizations on the first red line. It's going to suggest a friendly amendment because it's organizations such as that. Yeah.
Thank you. I specifically didn't read it because it was like, hey, that's in the wrong place. I think that should be an immaterial change, because it's just actually correcting the sentence structure to reflect what we actually intended. Any questions from board members who weren't on the committee?
Just want to say thanks to the committee and to staff for responding so quickly to the Scott community.
Great. And as part of our new protocol with the communications office, we'll be figuring out a way to send this out so we can get feedback from school communities to see if we've sort of hit the mark. I think we had good discussion in committee and tried to come up with something that was fair and address the issue that was raised, but hopefully we'll be able to, if there's additional public comment, make those changes. The third issue, and it's very exciting to be able to bring this from the committee tonight, finally, as Nick might say, is the student representative duties policy 1.20.012. And as board members in the community may recall, earlier this year we made a very small change to this policy to correct some statutory issues that we were trying to address, primarily technical. But tonight, we are bringing a set of pretty significant changes to the student representative. It's now called the Student Representative and District Student Council Policy forward. And I'm going to turn it over here in a minute to our student representative, but just want to acknowledge that this has been almost 2 years in the making. Our previous student rep, Moses Tran, this was a particular focus for him during his tenure and served on the Policy and Governance Committee, suggested a fair number of changes. He then handed the baton to Nick and the current District Student Council, and they have spent the year I think fine-tuning the recommendations and looking at how we can elevate student voice. So with that, I'd like to ask student rep to share that sort of highlights of the changes that we're recommending, the committee's recommending for this policy.
Definitely. Thank you, Director Edwards. I'm super excited about this too, and I want to thank Director Edwards for working with us as well through this process. So yeah, as the first thing, I'm just going to kind of run through the few major changes and additions that we made to the policy this year. So we did rename it. It's the Student Representative and District Student Council policy now. So it retains both the roles for my position as well as the role and the role and directionals for the District Student Council. So starting the first page, one of the first things that we added this year was more language on how the student representatives shall learn more about the board meeting procedure and central office staff and contacts from board staff and the outgoing representative before that elected student representative takes their position, so they know more about how the district works and how the central office works before they start their position, so they hit the ground running. Moving down, we decided that the council would be composed of 2 representatives from each district high school, including alternative high schools and programs. And one of the students will be elected, and the second representative, which is technically the backup representative, will be the student body president of that respective school. Moving further down, we added that the District Student Council shall receive sufficient funding from the superintendent's office to carry out our operations and events, namely the PPS Student Summit, which we've held for 2 years now. And moving into that, we also wrote that the District Student Council shall hold at least one PPS Student Council Summit per year to promote student voice, foster communications, and promote the work of the council as well. We've done this for 2 years now, and it's an amazing event, and we have a lot of fun planning it, and it's a great way to bring students together, so we really wanted to get that in there. Moving further down, we're going to work with student engagement, we also wrote that the superintendent shall appoint an individual at PPS to serve as the lead liaison with the district student council and the student representative. The superintendent's designee shall assist the district student council and student representative on matters of interest, meaning maintaining representation on the council, and meeting planning. So for the past couple of years, we've been with and without an adult position at PPS to kind of help us with our ways and means and communication to the district. So we're really looking forward to having an adult position at PPS to help us out at the district, as well as do our work and spread our communications throughout the district as well. So that's a really important part. And on the second page, it just further goes over that the superintendent's designee, the liaison, shall assist the council, the DSE, in connecting with the PPS superintendent, board members, and district staff for support and for help. And yeah, those are the main points of mainly what we went over. So there was a few, sentence changes and moving things around. And I guess actually the one other thing I would say is that we did add a big part of this year is we had a major increase in representation from students from alternative programs in PPS on our council this year. So I want to thank them, and those students have really helped out. Those students have really spoken up about how they wanted to be included in this policy, and they weren't before. So I'm super happy that that's in there as well. So that kind of wraps up.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes, speech.
Any questions or comments from other committee members?
I'm just happy to see sorry, Director Bailey, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
To see the piece about the staff liaison and that it is included in our budget proposal, because that has really thwarted some student advocacy in the last couple of years. The later start times for high schools is a really good example of that. It was amazing student advocacy, and frankly, we've just dropped the ball in terms of staff analysis of the impacts and really helping the students move the issue along. So I think to have someone accountable for really serving the students and their agenda will be helpful.
I'm happy with some of the changes here, and I think there's some things that are confusing and need fixes. I'm confused as whether there's 2 representatives from each school, or whether there's one and there's an alternative. And an alternate means there's one. It seems in the first section it says there are 2 reps. In 2A, it says that there is a rep and the student body president is the alternate. So I'm confused. Are there essentially 2 voting members, or is there 1?
That's a good point. Actually, I think you just caught that. I think it's supposed to be 1 voted representative, and the alternate is the student body president.
Okay.
So there's 1 representative and an alternate.
Right. So I think that's what composed saying 2 in the beginning. So maybe we just need to.
We should call out a representative and a alternate. Is that a cleaner?
I think
to say.
you want to
Ms.
say
King?
That makes sense
there's
to
1
me.
representative, and you need.
Okay.
That needs to be fixed or clarified. I still think the initial job description is pretty weak. I would like to see something in there, and I think the first time around when we made the technical fix, I had suggested some language on the role of the student rep is not only to be here and have a student voice in our discussions, but also to hold the district accountable for having student engagement on when we're doing policy, when issues come up, when there's district initiatives, that one of our questions off the top should be, does this directly impact students? Do we need to hear student voice? And it's sort of touched on, but I think that's a crucial role for you and your successors to play, and I think I'd like to see that called out. The second paragraph says the student rep will learn about and contribute to the board's work. I don't think we'd have a passage for elected board members to say, you're gonna learn about. That to me sounds condescending, you know. Maybe it doesn't to you, but when I read it, that's,
Participate in.
yeah. It's like you've got junior after your name, and,
Where is it?
Second paragraph.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So just beef that up a little bit.
Yeah, I'd take learn about out, but that's me, you know?
I
No,
think, and maybe there could be a different word, but I do think there's a different process by which the student rep gets to the board than the rest of the board members. So maybe a better verb choice, but there is a little bit different on-ramp than everybody else, which we should recognize. And
I'm not sure what our on-ramp is, frankly.
well,
But that's
Well,
another, that's
elections.
another
I certainly
discussion.
felt like I participated in a big on-ramp.
Right, but I mean, it might be a slightly different process, but it's similar to, you know, you get elected, or whether you're the student rep that gets elected or a board member who gets elected, there's a huge learning curve. And I think to call that out for the student and not for the elected reps is, you know, I see you as an elected
Right, an equal, yeah, right.
Um,
Okay. So it would be, no, and I mean, I agree with that. So to make it, I mean, it is the same process. It's like I'm coming at, you know, this position's coming in as an elected official, and it's, they, you know, they should be educated and should know. So just, I think we could work to beef. I guess all I can say is like beef that sentence up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because well, there really has been no. I mean,
I think you and us
Yeah.
need some really, there's work to do with that whole orientation process.
Well, that's, yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, the reason that's in here, and we put this in, mainly I put this in here as well, is because I didn't really get much of anything this year. I mean, we kind of, you know, I figured out my ways, and I had a lot of help from board staff, but I'm going to be working with the council, and especially next year's representative, to kind of craft that. And I'm already like working on it, on the ways to get them to know about the central office and the staff before I even leave. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
in the works. So.
Section 2A seems to be more about the council rather than the election of the student rep, and I wonder if that belongs in the first section organizationally. Most of 2A has to do with
The council instead of.
the election of the council and who's the alternate, and it seems like that's not part of the student rep election, that's part of the district student council, and so should go in that previous paragraph.
Okay, so that,
Okay.
keep going. I'm getting all these.
Okay, back to, another issue is that the red line wasn't exactly the same as the non-red line,
Yeah.
and that's, we
Yeah.
can't do that, folks. Which one is right?
Yeah, in several places.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So it's not, is it the right version of the red line, or the right version of the?
Oh. You know what?
I believe it's not the right version of the red line.
Oh.
I think the red.
Well,
I think
we-
the red line is
got it.
newer than the clean. It looks.
We did get a revised one by email, red line.
Oh, okay, that may have been. So in.
We did,
We did.
by email, but that's what I asked for when we came in, but I'm not sure if this is it or if this is the prior version. We did get a late breaking
Oh, that's-
revised
yeah,
red
that's
line
right.
by email.
So that may be my bad rather than somebody
Okay.
else's bad,
Yeah.
but can, 2F. in the event that the DSC is unable to fulfill its obligations under this policy, either due to its termination, if it's terminated, we've violated the policy, and that makes no sense to me to have something in a policy about if the policy is violated. If the policy is in place, then we have a DSC.
Right.
And we can only terminate the DSC if we change the policy. So I don't get why that section is in there.
Okay, keep going. 'cause
And then to talk about a student assembly that's democratic, what does that mean? Ensure
Is that one?
adequate and equitable represent. I mean, there's a lot of very unspecific wording in there.
Anything
And-
else?
And the second part of F seems to be on a different topic than the first part of F, so maybe should be G. Yeah, it was just that whole section. I didn't quite get why it was there.
Anything else? Don't worry. We're gonna, come on.
It's all making it better. Just want to keep it going.
So just a question about the wisdom of putting a specific event that carries out a goal into policy. What if next year you go, well, that student summit was a good idea, but a better way of doing things is to do something else. You're stuck with policy that says, no, you're going to do a student summit, whether it's the best thing to do or not. Isn't policy better just to really focus on a goal level rather than a specific way to carry out that goal?
Sometimes, although this is, I think a summit is, could be interpreted different ways.
And
This is
that was
student-
kind of a
This is a
cornerstone.
student-driven
Well, I'm
policy, so just.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we could, yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is to just hold an event, like a conference. So, I mean, in no way is it meant to be completely specific. I think the main idea behind it is just like, you should work towards hosting something that more students, that you can bring students into and bring students together. So,
And that was one of the
yeah.
one of the things that you guys were all most passionate about is
Right.
making sure that it was included in policy so that it happened every year, that
Mhm.
some annual convening.
Right, to turn it into an
So I-
ongoing annual, right.
Okay. You've got my 2 cents worth and
Okay.
And wait. Oh, there's a reference to leadership advisors.
That got
At the school
fixed.
level.
That got
Didn't it?
Oh,
Oh, the issue of leadership advisors.
Yeah, that is in 2A.
2A.
The school
This-
administration and leadership advisors.
Advisors.
So again, it's lower case.
Some schools have multiple, some schools have a teacher that serves as the director, so
Okay.
kind of meant to be broad-ish.
Okay. We're missing a period after
Got
DSC
it.
in that sense. I think that's everything I have. Oh, there was an ASP in there somewhere too.
we got that to, it was supposed to be ASB.
That was fixed, okay.
I'm gonna come back to your comments in just a minute.
Jewel get fixed too?
Yes, it got fixed. I'm gonna come back to your comments. Any other questions or comments from, 'cause I think everybody else except for Paul, were on the committee. So I'm gonna, Director Bailey, thank you for the thorough reading and the suggestions. And in the spirit of wanting to help get this over the finish line in a way that we didn't with the last student representative, I'm gonna ask if I can offline work through each of these. I think there's some very easy ways to remedy the issues you've raised. I mean, some of them is just moving things around or clarifying some things. I think there's 2 places where there's substantive, maybe 1 or 2 sentences to add. So I'd like to work with you to make those changes, and then we'll circulate it to the rest of the board so that we can
I was just
That
going to
is-
say,
Yeah,
the most important thing here is that we need to affirm Nick's legacy, and we need to get this done by the end of the school
Right.
year.
So I'm gonna just really keep
Countdown.
pushing,
I appreciate
pushing
that.
this forward. And I do appreciate, and we also want to do it well, so
Yeah.
Yes.
maybe the 3 of us can come with language, we'll send it out to the rest of the board, we'll make sure it's posted, but just to keep things moving, we're not gonna wait till the next committee meeting, is that okay?
That's fine. Can I just get some clarification? I think these changes are significant enough that they will warrant another first reading.
Yes, we've left this grammatical.
So what I'm going to ask is, so here's what I'm thinking just in terms of process-wise, so that if Director Bailey and I and Nick come up with a set of changes that we think addresses the issues that we send it out. What is going to be required if we're going to seal Nick's legacy is that people need to review that, and before the board meeting, provide any feedback if we've missed the mark in some way, because otherwise we will come to the next board meeting assuming we have a first draft ready to be first read
Yeah.
Fair enough.
again.
And I can add to that note too. I mean, we've been in direct contact too with Jonathan Garcia about this policy as well, and he's looking forward to next year. I mean, it doesn't stop here. There's always new changes and additions you can make. So I know he has some great ideas for next year, as well as adding that liaison position to help us out as well. So I think getting this foundation through, and then next year coming back, over the summer, and then next year coming back and building off there is a great way to go. So it will continue.
I have full faith that we will follow through on the spirit of elevating student voice, including things like a onboarding student handbook for DSC members, a series of events, plus a summit. We're looking forward to this work.
And speaking of his legacy, the statue, when we talk.
Right there, new paint.
So I think the goal here is that work will be done over the next week, and we will come back next week, hopefully with a draft ready for another first reading. Right? Okay.
Correct. And again, thank you, Director Bailey. And I just ask everybody to, if we wait to the next meeting, to catch additional things.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting that we've had a couple times where we've had some just either typos or other things, is that always staff has the right to make those changes, and they're immaterial, and they're just part of the polishing up process. Okay. There we go.
Okay, so for the first 2 policies, they have now been first read? Is that
Read
terminology?
first.
Read first. First. Anyway, they're posted and open for public comment over the next 21 days. The last day to comment on the capital asset renewal funds and plans and the community use of school buildings and facilities policies will be April 30th, 2019. The board will hold a second reading of the policies at the May 14th meeting unless there are substantive changes that emerge from the comment period. Okay. And we will be returning to the student representative and, what are we calling it now? Student representative and district student council policy. Okay. Okay. Moving on to the next item, local option levy. This item has been discussed in the Legislative and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, and this will be the first time we've had a fairly extensive discussion in committee, and we're bringing it now for a full discussion about decision-making around renewing the local option levy, and I'm going to ask Director Bailey to lead the discussion.
So, Stephanie, were you planning on running through the timeline, or be happy to do that? So just as a matter of introduction, it's an opportunity for us to say thank you again to voters for supporting students by passing the local option levy in this current year, and thank you, Ms. Hertz, for the information. It's contributed about $94.9 million to our budget, supporting roughly 950 teachers. It's an integral part of our operations now. And the last levy that we passed expires after next year. And so, if you could take it away.
Sure, Director Bailey, this is I'm Stephanie Soden, and I just am sharing a document that was in your packet that covers just a few basic deadlines and milestones you'll need to consider when discussing renewal of the levy in November. And so what we would recommend is that, I know the committee's talked about establishing a political action committee and campaign. We anticipate in our normal course of business educating the public and stakeholders about the benefits of the levy and also the capital bond. So that will continue as we've been doing so. According to the Multnomah County Elections Division, you would have to have a decision, discuss and have a decision if you want to refer by August 28th in order to meet the September 5th deadline for filing, and then the November 5th is the general election date.
Okay, I think there's a number of considerations about when to go out, but I think having November 5th as sort of our current plan is where what we'd recommend. There's questions about what else might be on the ballot then. There is a chance that if there is statewide tax reform, for example, that would be put on the ballot for a November election. That might not be
most likely January.
Most likely January. But if November is still not completely out of the question, depending on the timing.
The one ballot measure we do know that's planned for November is the renewal of Metro's parks and natural areas levy. So in the same instance, if you chose to continue the levy, the PPS levy, at the same rate. Metro's also extending theirs at the same rate, so it'd be no increase on taxes.
Okay.
So just on the timing, this local option expires the end of the 1920 or the 2021 school year?
1920.
1920. So if we didn't go in November, May would be our last opportunity in order to get it in place before the start. Renew it.
Tax assessor on July 15th, yes.
Which has obvious implications for our planning and staffing and everything
Yeah.
else.
That's a lot of teachers. And again, these funds are dedicated solely to paying for certified staff. Is that technically what's in the levy?
Yes, for teachers.
Okay, so certified staff also includes, as well as classroom teachers per se, also librarians.
I would have to confirm with staff, but I believe we are spending it on classroom teachers.
Okay.
That's what the current levy is, but it's not the
Yes.
requirement by law.
Correct.
Okay. And we do keep a separate fund in our books specifically to show
We track it.
money coming in and
Yes.
specifically that it's spent for teachers. And I believe our Citizens Budget Review Committee has said, yep, that's what they're doing. Money
Yeah,
comes in
it's a
and it gets spent on
confirmation
teachers.
annually, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Community Budget Review Committee reviews the financial information around the levy every year, delivers a report annually to the board, accounting for the use of the funds. And it's delivered to the board generally at the same time they opine on the superintendent's budget.
So
So,
given,
yeah, go ahead.
just a recommendation, given that this past year, we've had, I think, two sort of notable events that received widespread sort of community attention that I think we also should sort of provide sort of corresponding follow-up on is, because they both, I think, go to the heart of how we spend our money, is the state audit and then also the bond audit. While we recognize that they're separate buckets of money, one being OpEx and the other being or operations and the other being capital, that I think in the community it's all taxpayers' money, and that I would recommend that over the next year, and I know we've already started this, is like on a quarterly basis at our full board meetings, have reporting on both of those issues. I think it's built in, but not just having it at the committee level, because I think that's going to be part of whether voters sort of their comfort level with it is still a big ask. Portland voters have always been very generous, especially on the local option, and supportive. I just think we've had two events that will likely require us to have a continuing ongoing conversation with the community about and providing information. And like tomorrow night, I think we have in the audit committee the first discussion of the bond performance audit, and then we'll be coming to the full board at some point. But again, sort of having a broader, transparent conversation in the community about those issues.
Anybody else want to chime in anything?
So I think we have, we have, what's the word? Contracted with a consultant to help us with campaign strategy and planning. And there'll be a kind of you know, a relatively slow buildup over time, as, you know, to develop the strategy and work with the consultant on the collaterals, the information that we want to provide to voters as we get closer to the election date.
We not being Portland Public Schools.
The board.
A political action committee.
Yes.
Is in negotiations. But not the board as a public body.
We want to be clear that the district has not consulted with a campaign
Yes.
contractor. It's the political action
Nor
committee.
has the board as a board, and this memo says the board establishes political action committee. Board leaders may establish a political
Yes.
action committee in our capacity as individual citizens, but not the board.
I mean, the reality is,
I'm going to shut up now.
anybody can, I think and traditionally in the past, it's been a community member who has been the treasurer and actually set it up, and board members have done a lot of the fundraising, but traditionally has been sort of outside of even the board.
That's not school board business.
And thanks, Director Bailey, for taking a leadership role on this. Yeah. One other level of volunteering.
Good times. Okay, anything else?
When is this going to come back to us again? So, I think we benefit from another conversation. So this week or the next couple weeks, there will be a very large, I'm anticipating, investment package and tax package coming out of Salem, or that will be proposed and likely voted on. And I think it probably merits a discussion, because I do think there will be confusion in the community, like, oh, a $2 billion tax package, that should take care of all of our issues. So again, just as with the sort of like on the accountability side and the auditing, I think it's worth an ongoing conversation with the community so people have all the facts, because I do think there will be, and this will be sort of the bittersweet part for local districts, that people, if there is a big infusion at the state level, there will be many communities where the sense will be that is going to be the solution instead of local additional funds. So I just think there's benefit to having an ongoing conversation so our community understands how this fits into a larger package, even if there is a large investment at the state level.
Communication. And this is something that the district can communicate clearly with stakeholders. It's different funding streams, and then if something, and that's still a big if, something comes out of Salem, and then again, that might be on the ballot. There's just a lot of ifs, and we need some certainty. And again, this is a huge part of our budget. So we need to communicate that very clearly.
Thank you.
I think we all want to be prudent stewards of the public resource. I think it is going to be important to sort of convey the value add. We are hopeful that there is an infusion, and maybe that will move us up the list from 48th to maybe 46th. And we can talk about arts education and libraries and all the other things that our students deserve.
Any other discussion? Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the board's 2019-2020 budget. I guess I'm going to lead the discussion on this. Can I ask, would you like to come up in case there are additional questions? Okay, so you all have copies of the proposed proposed budget, a spreadsheet with the proposed budget and an explanatory memo outlining the assumptions that went into creating this budget. I guess a couple of things I want to point out. There has been an increase in the total number for the board budget between last year and this year. And almost all of it is attributable to 3 items. The first is the addition of 2 auditors who together account for about $190,000. We have 1 auditor who has been hired and 1 position that is still vacant but presumably will be filled. In process. Second item is a board professional development opportunity that we have been offered by the Council of Great City Schools. It's the Board Development Institute that will be taking place at Harvard. I had to get that in there. And that accounts for approximately $28,000. And the third item is the dues associated with the Council of Great City Schools in the amount of $38,000, which is not an increase in, that represents a shift, just a reallocation from the superintendent's office to the board office where it should more appropriately be located.
What's the rationale for that?
Well, just as the board office pays for the OSBA dues, it makes sense to also have the Council of Great City Schools dues come out of the board office rather than the superintendent's.
Actually,
I don't agree with that.
It's a budgetary wash.
This
Yeah.
came as a recommendation from the budget director and CFO. It's consistent with what they've seen in other districts across the state, which is why we put it there.
So if that's going to transfer, I think I'm with Director Constam, because I don't feel, so we have a designated representative, but I don't feel that, unlike OSBA, where I feel like we can just pick up the phone and will be responded to, that the board, individual board members, has the same access to services from the Council of Great City Schools. So I'm not seeing it, I'm seeing it being, we get some tertiary benefit, but it doesn't seem like it's the whole board.
I definitely feel like we have good access on governance issues when we need it, but that the primary, the benefit there is for all, the superintendent and all of our staff who have relationships with their peers around the country and the ability to share best practices in a variety of ways. And also, now that we are becoming more of a participating member in terms of sharing our data and sharing our KPIs, the benefit is really going to be used and situated among all departments in the district. So it's, it's coming out of our global budget, so it's not really a big deal anyway, but it is not primarily the board that uses those services or the board that primarily benefits from those services.
It's an institutional membership, so the council, again, is made up of 74 urban school districts. The council is made up of half school board members and half superintendents, and districts to differing levels have availed themselves of different kinds of services. So it might be governance, it might be budgetary, it might be instructional. That's partly up to us to sort of get in the queue, of which we haven't been for over a decade, really was the last time the council, I think, did an audit at our request. So we certainly will continue to be a much more active presence, and starting with talking about our ongoing work. There's actually a call for RFPs to share that work at their annual fall conference, but I'm kind of agnostic about where it sits, wherever it suits the board. But I do encourage us to take advantage as appropriate where we want to get some technical assistance or participate in the opportunities the council affords. So it isn't just what superintendents get out of the council, it's the fact that throughout the course of the school year, they sponsor convenings for role-alikes. So our chiefs of HR all come together and network. Our instructional leads come together and network. And so the benefit of those networks and to share where people are in their work and strategic planning, I think, is invaluable. And we're glad to have the opportunity to participate in their inaugural Board Governance Institute this summer, which, having been participating, almost 10 different summers with different district teams and board members, they've always felt what an important investment that was. We'll certainly sort of do some outreach to see if there's any external sort of support for that, and if board members have any leads, happy to follow up on those. But I do think, investing in our human capital, that includes our governance and district leadership, is important.
And I just made a phone call to one of their consultants this week to get some advice. So it's available for board members as well.
I'm in
And I think-
contact on at least monthly basis.
And I think it's worth noting that we are currently getting, we, the board, are currently getting a substantial amount of assistance on board development and board governance from the Council of Great City Schools. And I think this represents the first time that I'm aware of that PPS has availed itself of any of the resources that are available through the Council of Great City Schools.
In terms of governance.
Just to lend a little further transparency, given I sit on the executive committee, we are regular evaluating the membership. So folks who have not been participating or paying their dues for that matter, or a long list of districts who want to become part of the council, who, as a matter of practice, oftentimes are being turned down in joining the network. So, there are certainly benefits to being part of the council.
For sure.
So I would just say that I think, based on the statements that I've made, that it certainly warrants a split versus just coming out of the board office budget. And then the other thing I would ask is that we have some sort of mechanism in place, in that all the information gets shared across the board, not just whoever is the designated rep to the council. But I think it seems much more equitable to split the dues versus, especially given that the superintendent sits on the executive committee, because if you don't go to their conferences, the actual interaction as an individual board member is fairly low.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
yeah, I don't care one way or another where it sits. I mean, I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I mean, it's a budgetary wash.
I've got some other items that we've got a number of other items where either we were budgeting low and actually spending a lot more, and local meetings, 11,000 last year, 26,000 this year, and a couple of other items like that. I think if we're going to spring for some extra money to go to Harvard, then maybe we make some, hey, we're looking at a cut budget, then we should look at cutting back our board travel and other categories.
I totally agree. I actually think if that the Harvard Institute, we should try and secure private funding for that, or some sort of philanthropic or foundation support.
A few efforts underway.
Okay, well, I think that's really important, because I do agree, if we're going to be cutting days or cutting teachers or making
Yeah.
other reductions, I think it doesn't send the right message. We can maybe swap out one of our out-of-state trips for that
Yeah.
out-of-state trip.
Yeah.
Director Bailey, on the local meetings costs, that's where the food for board meetings
No,
is
that's-
budgeted. And last school year, you did not meet most every Tuesday like you do now. So the budget is quite a bit higher. We
Mhm.
estimated 3 times per month with that
Yeah.
dollar amount.
I think that's a good target for cutting.
Oh, and there's also coverage for the OSBA fall conference in there as well. So there's some other local meetings and development that's accounted for in that budget.
Okay. Printing costs. So I personally would say even though I really like printed stuff in hand to read, I'm willing to forego that in terms of the board packets and the courier service, just post it online.
I completely agree. Our board book is a really good option because there's ways that you can like do comments and things like that. Yeah.
So I'm just going to speak up here, is that I want to continue to get a paper copy, and I didn't use any personal reimbursement funds last year, and I'm willing to not do it again. But absent me getting a printed copy, I will be spending my evening printing it, and because that's how I work, and I serve on several other boards that converted.
And I get that.
It just I'm willing to use my resources in a different way because I don't have a color printer at home, the right sizes, and it's not how I do my work. So I'm happy to have my printing costs be absorbed by my potential travel that I don't do.
Yeah, and also the 2K reimbursement I don't need either, so.
Is that that's an increase from
And
this
that's,
year?
other
It is an
folks,
increase.
So
we deserve to have that as an option. I'm not saying take that away, but.
So, yes, that is an increase. It had been $1,000 a year. And we are now going to a system where, in order to get reimbursement, you're going to have to actually track expenses. And I can tell you that expenses, if you track them, are almost certainly more than $1,000 a year.
I don't want to think about it.
Huh?
I don't want to think about it.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
Most people don't have the luxury of donating both time and money. And if we want to ensure that school board service is not the sole preserve of the wealthy, the independently wealthy, then we need to make accommodations so that just plain folks can actually make this a doable gig. And in order to do that, Lord knows school board members make plenty of sacrifices, and they should not have to take a financial hit on top of it, or at least any more than they're going to anyway. I don't think it's unreasonable to allow for the possibility that a school board member might ask for reimbursements for travel and parking. And if they actually track it, I can almost guarantee you, because I've done it, it is going to be more than $1,000. So I think it is a reasonable increase for next year's budget.
I agree.
What's the mileage reimbursement rate?
Need to look it up.
It's like
Okay.
43 or
No, it's more than that.
It's more than that.
It's probably like 55 cents a mile or something like that. It's, I assume it's the regular government rate.
So it'd be like 3,000 miles or. So on the interpreters, I noticed that we're looking at potentially making a change based on the current usage, and I think this is something we wrestled with of how to more effectively utilize what we view as an important concept. So I know there was a proposal to have it just be on, now that they'd be available with prior notice. Is that what this budget's based on? So a community member,
With the exception of things like special board meetings or budget hearings where we provide childcare interpretation.
so a community member had a suggestion on a way that we could, somebody who does some interpreting occasionally for the district, a way that, for a pretty low-cost way that we could potentially not have with prior notice really be in effect we don't offer it because nobody ever knows and nobody ever asks, is that potentially having one of our staff interpreters record a message, messages in the 5 major languages, and then use for those meetings which we think there may be additional interest from the broader community to do like an auto dial. And that if you have staff interpreters doing it, there's no cost to having them do that, and we have an automated phone system anyway. So as a way to do some specific outreach without any cost. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. For those of you who don't know me, Stephanie Cameron, Senior Director of Communications, and my team handles the interpretation and translation for the district. And in the next fiscal year, in fact, in this fiscal year, we will have a new opportunity that we haven't had in the past as we add captioning to our live broadcast of board meetings, and that will give us then a new opportunity for translation of those captions. We don't have all of the details of that ironed out quite yet, but I think it's going to provide us with another opportunity to provide translated information to those who are not here in the boardroom with us. I think we would still have a need for some sort of interpretation for those who want to attend in person. But there is another option with that technology that we will have in the next fiscal year.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's great. I'm just worried if we have it be, well, you have to ask in advance, like how do people know how to ask in advance?
Sure.
So having some sort of mechanism, whether it's, again, the Pulse, emails where things translated, or again, having like our interpreters, our staff interpreters do an auto dial in the 5 main languages so that people know if they come to a meeting, or here's how, if you want to come to the meeting, here's what you need to do in order to request an interpreter.
In answer to your question, it's 58 cents a mile.
How much is it? 58
cents.
Which is standard government rate. It's not
So in addition, in this document, and I don't know if this is just a discussion document, but there's under 3E, it talks about board member travel funded by district departments. And I think it's a separate discussion because it's not really the budget discussion, but that there should be some sort of criteria. Again, this is to just best practice not to have things funded specific for individual board members from district departments.
which is essentially what that says.
Right. What I'm saying is that there should be there's an exemption under exceptional circumstances. So under what circumstances, what criteria would that be?
I don't know. I mean, an exceptional circumstance would be exceptional. So.
Well, I'm just suggesting, and not as part of this budget document, but that's a conversation to have. What is the criteria for the exceptional circumstance and for an individual board member? That just keeps both the district staff and board members out of trouble. I want to say our biggest value I think we get from the board office budget is our staff. We get great support from Roseanne and Karen, so I think that's the most important support we get as a board.
Here, here. Thanks, Rita, for working on this.
So, any other? So I think the lingering question is, paper versus digital. I think there is, okay, I'll make this an I statement. I like paper as much as anybody. I mean, I'm old, so paper is a thing. But I'm being buried in paper. And the current system that we have does not allow for any kind of searchable database for board materials. If you're trying to find something that is that has happened at a board meeting, if you don't know the approximate date when a board meeting happened that discussed whatever you're looking for, it's essentially not findable. If we did a digital version, either the board book or, I mean, there are a couple of options. It would, in addition to, saving some trees, actually quite a few trees over the course of a year, it would create a searchable database of materials that would make it much easier for, I think, all of us to keep track of what we're doing on a weekly basis.
And you can group documents sequentially, like
Yeah.
under one tab, which is really helpful.
I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can organize things at that point, which is not possible when you're talking about PDF files and reams of paper.
So I currently serve on two boards, Oregon State University's board and Pacific University, and they both have electronic board books. And I will say that there are definitely advantages, and half of the board still gets paper versions because that's an effective way for them to work, and the other half, it's all available on the board book, but not everybody uses it, and there's definitely shortcomings with that. So while it's certainly an option, and I think from a historical standpoint may provide a easier way to access it, individual board members have different ways of working, and what I've found is just because you have it doesn't mean that that's the preferred and best way for all board members to get it.
So I think to summarize, there's ways we can lower a couple of these budget items and make some trade-offs in terms of board travel. I don't think in a cuts environment, we can't and shouldn't have it all. And I'd be happy to work on some kind of counterbalancing thing, or if somebody else is in the middle of taking that on, that's great. And I think there's opportunities for reducing, not eliminating copier costs. And I understand perfectly what you're saying about paper versus electronics. But I think there's opportunities there for letting people opt out of that. And
We're going to go on the meal diet.
What?
We're going to go on the meal diet.
No,
You're going to draw the line
then
there.
we take those savings and put them into food, and we're good.
Can I just, I think we need to be a little careful about how we treat board travel. The travel is not really travel. I mean, it's not like we're going to Maui.
I meant the out-of-town travel.
No,
Yeah,
but
we're still not
even-
going to Maui.
Yeah.
I mean, the board travel is an allocation for board professional development. And I don't know about you, but I think I think we could stand some board professional development.
No, it's tremendously useful.
And it is revelatory to go to a conference and hear how other school districts talk about what they're doing.
And informally to talk with other people who are working on the same things in other places.
And I think, if we forego those kinds of opportunities, then we only know what we know, and what we know has been less than optimal, I think, in terms of both district functionality and board functionality.
Yeah, I'm not arguing against the value. I'm just saying we're making cuts. We're in a
Okay,
cut
and
budget,
I-
and we had some very persuasive testimony tonight about a 0.6 here and a 0.6 there, and
Right.
so that's the milieu we're in.
So, I mean, if we're gonna try to look for cuts, I think we need to make judicious cuts, and we need to be thinking about long-term implications of whatever cuts we make. And
Chair Moore, just to underline, because we do want to be responsible about precious resources, precisely because we're a $1 billion plus organization, to not take advantage of opportunities, not even just conferences, to participate in opportunities like this institute, which I think are going to tackle issues that other districts are tackling as they develop strategic plans and have a multi-year vision to implement, and have a chance to challenge themselves about where the efficiencies lie and where the high leverage strategies are that will impact on student outcomes. Elected board members don't necessarily have the educational background or the management experience, or there's always going to be a variability there. So any time to bring folks together to do that training is almost, it could be argued, the responsible thing to do to be effective in your roles. So we as staff will proceed at the board's direction on however you want to shape your budget, but I will always speak to the importance of building professional capacity and organizational learning. So if that's one area where we're going to emphasize this summer and the board wants to look at other areas, I just want to make that pitch.
I just want to say I'm with Director Bailey. I just think it could be a really tough year, and yes, it's a honor to receive an invitation to attend something at Harvard. So I've attended 3 different, not in this capacity, but 3 different summer institutes over a period of year. But the question I think the community will ask is, is this the only place you can get it? Is this the cost? So I just think we have to be mindful of the ways that we're cutting other things, or, I'll just take tonight the custodial fees. We've set a $10,000 budget for Title I schools to have their custodial fees waived, and said, we're going to limit to one event a year that you can have your fees waived. And it's within those contexts that I think we have to be able to justify our budget, and is it a nice to have or is it essential? And that's just the question I think we need to ask ourselves. Are we getting what we need, that professional development, in the most cost-effective way?
Yeah, and we're talking 1 year. If we're going to do a big bump up for a Harvard thing, then I'm saying we can forego some other things this year and do them next year. So it's not like we're disinvesting in, we're increasing our budget for PD just in that one thing alone. And I fully support that going there.
Just a process question. So we're going to take this discussion and it's going to be loaded into the overall budget. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So once we get our budget, we're going to have a huge budget dropped on us, and then, not dropped on us, but we've had some previews of it, but we'll get it, and then it'll be sort of a sprint through to approval and then adoption. One thing, just given our fiduciary role, is I would like to have a similar discussion about the superintendent's budget, given that that's the only employee that the board manages and that we're accountable for those expenditures as well.
I think that's,
I mean, just like last year, it came around as a specific.
Right, I just don't want it to be as part of, here's $200 million and spend, just like we spent some time tonight on our budget, which I know we'll all be accountable for how that money gets spent, but we're also accountable for the one employee, well, the two that we have, also the auditors, but that's the other place where we ultimately have some accountability as well. So I don't want it just to be as part of the $600 million view.
Chair Moore. I have no outstanding issues with the business agenda, and I'm departing for my kids' game.
Okay. Any further discussion of the board budget? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the business agenda. The board will now vote on its business agenda. Ms. Houston, are there any changes?
No.
Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Director Bailey moves, Director Anthony seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Is there any public comment?
There is not.
Okay. Is there any board discussion on the business agenda? Nope. Okay. The board will now vote on the business agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Representative Paisler?
Yes.
Okay, the business agenda is approved by a vote of 6-0 with Student Representative Paisler voting yes. Do we have any committee or conference reports?
Superintendent gave him.
So I'll just say the audit committee is meeting tomorrow from 5 to 7. And the two topics are going to be a continuation of the state audit and the preparation for the quarterly report, and also the bond performance audit that we recently received, and regarding the variance between the approved amount of the bond and the ultimate cost of the bond projects. And the documents will be posted online. I know the board has received them, but any community members, we should have those posted so that people can see what the findings were, and there'll be an ongoing discussion. I'm sure we'll bring it to the board.
Any other reports? Okay. Any other business? Okay. The next meeting of the board will be held next week, April 9th, 2019. And this meeting is adjourned.